Hi, I'm Matt from hockeyreviews.ca, and this is probably the most asked video of me to do reviews on in a while, and that is specifically of true goalie pads. So this is specifically, as you can see, the Catalyst PX3 pad, and there's a bit of a backstory between these pads or behind these pads, so I have to explain that. But first, let me just say, you've already seen the thigh rise test video of this, and you haven't, make sure you watch it. I'll link it up over here as well as in the description because these pads performed phenomenal in that thigh rise test. So make sure you definitely check that out. So a little bit of backstory on this pad. True sent me this entire set to do videos and make content on, and it happened in a weird way, but I want to be very upfront about things in terms of how this happened. I got very lucky in this regard, so I want to be very thankful about that, but I also want to just explain it to be upfront because the set was given to me for free. I have been asked about doing pad reviews for True and the whole gear for quite a while, and I did kind of the snapshot reviews with the gear at Just Hockey, so the 12.2, but I never got to use it on ice, and I never got to customize a set. I probably should have bought a 20.2 set because that would probably have been right down my alley, but I couldn't get a demo set to try out, and I wanted to do a demo set before I actually spent money on one because I wanted to get an idea of how they played as well. But when the PX3 set came out, they had a timeline of I think it was 7 weeks or something crazy in terms of turnaround. It was either it might have been 8 to 12 or something like that in terms of buying a custom set and getting them. And it was right when the launch of the PX3 happened. So I tried to order a set through a retailer, and unfortunately the order kind of got lost in the shuffle and something didn't work out right. I waited and waited, and then 20 weeks went by, and then I didn't get anything, and then I found out that the order was never placed. It became by the point of, it was January at that point, and I ordered them the second you could order them in this colorway. Then at that point I reached out to Just Hockey, and I was talking to them, and I was debating placing this custom order, and Just Hockey had something else there, which were these, which are Pro Return Catalyst PX3s. These were made for Anton Forsberg of the Ottawa Senators. These are 34 plus 3s. These are 34 plus 2s. Just Hockey had them, and I thought, you know what? I really want these pads. I really want to try them out. I really want to do a review of True Gear. I'm going to go there, see if I can fit into these. I don't think I'll fit a 34-3. I think they'll be too big in the thigh, but I'm going to try them, see how they are. So I bought these pads. I use them a lot. These are probably my most used pads since January. I bought them in January, and I use them a lot since January. These played in every single playoff game on my 5 goalie teams. This pad set is obviously Pro Returns. They have a K Whitmore signature on them somewhere, but they're made for Anton Forsberg, so not directly my set. But they had something interesting on here, and that is this thigh rise piece right here. And you can see the difference in thickness. So how this one gets way thicker and this one is thinned out. So people saw these when I think a couple goalies had it on their 20.2 set. Bobrovsky did. This one was the thinned out one, and some goalies still have this design. This was for Forsberg. This was the retail design, ended up being, this is not the retail design. So I happen to have the contact information of someone at True, and I just sent them a text message and said, hey, I have some questions of these. I just want to know what the difference of this is compared to the retail one because I'm going to review these pads, but I want to make sure what I'm talking about isn't available to retail customers because this is slightly different. So that person jumped on a phone call with me and kind of explained some things and talked to some things and talked to the gear with me, and then basically just said, well, why don't we get you a set? And I was kind of blown away with that. This set ended up coming to fruition. I wanted to do the review to this set and to do it justice, and I wanted to get it on the ice a bit. Unfortunately, when I got this set, I was mid-playoffs, and as much as I like using new gear all the time, I don't like being the reason my team gets knocked out of playoffs. And if I show up in brand new gear and we lose, my teams are not going to be happy with me. So I ended up wearing this all the time. So I didn't get to use these until after my season started, and then it's been about from May I've been able to get this on the ice a bunch of times, and it's for training with Junior B and Junior A players, and got a real good feel of them. Played a couple shinny games as well as actual summer beer league games with them, and I'm very confident in how I can talk about these and it's the slight differences on these. So now I can do this review. So I want to apologize to that person at True, first of all, for this taking so long. And yes, this intro is a lot longer than normal, but I want to get all this info out there and be very upfront of how this happened, because generally speaking, I don't get free custom sets of goalie gear. I, believe it or not, have bought in all of my custom set of goalie gear in the past. So this was the very first set that I've ever gotten for free. So I wanted just to call that out because that will probably bring some inherent bias, people will believe. I have a good history of ignoring those biases and being as honest as I possibly can when talking about the gear. So we're gonna jump into this and talk about this. Now, before we begin all that, Core Tech, which are Core shorts, and people have heard of these before, they were labeled under Under Armour before. Now Bauer sells hockey specific one, but Core themselves sell their own line of pants and supportive clothing and apparel. Basically, this stuff helps you with growing strains, growing pulls, and helps keep your hips tight and everything like that. And speaking of injuries, I kind of pulled a growing playing in the playoffs a few months ago and have had to keep using these Core Tech shorts to make sure my growing doesn't get worse. When I don't wear them, I can feel it and it hurts kind of to walk the next day. With these, keeps everything nice and tight and keeps everything from stretching out too far and getting injured. So these have been a huge savior for me. Check out the link in the description to their website and use my coupon code that's in there to get a discount, and I'll put it on the screen here. It helps support myself and the channel so I can make content and doing real reviews, but also you get a solid product that I use all the time and basically am needed in order to keep my growing from falling apart. Otherwise, if you want to support the channel without buying anything, check out the links in the description to Patreon and buy me a coffee. Everything through those links always comes back into the channel so I can keep making more content and doing more reviews. So jumping on into this pad, and we are going to talk about the most important thing right away here, and that is the graphics of these pads, which is fantastic. As you can see, these are amazing. Now obviously graphics aren't actually that important, and as well, this graphic is a whole lot of color, and it's basically every blue I could find on their customizer. One, I absolutely love these pads. It's very neat, and one of the reasons I love all this like design and stuff is because all these little color sections are separate and you can do separate ones. So sometimes, like, you see how this and this are the same color. They're actually not on the customizer. I chose because I wanted more of this color on the pad, so I threw it there. But sometimes when you select for companies where you select like this one and this one, they have to match, and then it kind of throws the whole graphic off. True does an awesome job of separating each one to be an individual zone, so you can do stuff like this. So I put these two as the same color as well because this is the Ice Blue Seattle. It looks fantastic color. It's like a seafoam green almost, and I wanted more of that on my pad, so I put it on there. But stuff like this where every single color is different and can be different, and that allows you to do a lot of creative and different things. Like if you wanted to just do this and right here, it would look very clean and it could look like an old Coho style graphic that we've seen in the past. Speaking of Coho looking graphics, you have stuff like this, which also looks like kind of a Coho style graphic, and it is a very clean design. Or you can go crazy and do stuff kind of like what I did here, and you can do some like a Y shape, and you can do interesting things there. Now I also like how it does like the graphic itself, while it doesn't split on the front. So normally I like when you do have a graphic that splits on the front, it does on the back. And what I mean by that is this one right here, this graphic, like lines up perfectly with this graphic. So if you wanted to do something cool, so like say these are all blue and then this was like red, it looks like it's a slash through. So it's kind of cool like that. And as well, these line up down here as well. So I'm a huge fan of like decisions to do stuff like that, and I think they did a really good job on this graphic. I was just a huge fan of this. I think there's a lot of unique combos you can do, and you can go crazy like this. Well, this doesn't really match anyone. It's really out there, and I love the colors, but the graphic choice and everything is really awesome on it. I am going to talk about this right off the bat because it's one of the more important things of the pad, and that is sizing. So when Lefebvre did their first version, it was branded as Lefebvre, and the 20.1s, the sizing on it was different than what you would expect. So I would normally be like in a 35 design CCM pad, and now I was in a 34. And because of the boot shape and everything, it really adjusted that. And it kind of continued with this, but it also continues with this because of the FRS system, which we'll talk about kind of in the future. This is a straight up 34+2 pad, and it matches my XL, which is 36. Bauer pads, it matches my 36+1 Optic 2s. The knee is almost higher than all of those pads when you actually wear them, depending on how you strap them, which is also a big thing. That FRS system comes into play for that a lot. So the whole purpose of this pad, as well as the boot design, is to basically keep the pad up off your skate a bit. So you get more movement on your skate itself, but two, you get more thigh rise. AHL and AHL have obviously, you know, that LDS system, which is the max pad height. So when you have different strapping options and when the pad kind of comes up, you can cheat a bit with your whole pad length, because someone who used to be at 35+2 can then get away with a 34+3 because of the whole pad design and because the pad fits differently than kind of what the other ones did in the past. That is kind of the case here, where this 34 plus 2, which sounds crazy if you've known my pad history, actually works very, very well. If anything, is a little bit big for me on the knee block, and I'll show proof of this like from gameplay, but that's all because of that strapping system. When I wear my 34 plus 3 Pro Returns here, and because of the way I strap them, they actually fit a little bit better than the 34 plus 2s because the pad doesn't ride up as much on my leg, and my knee ends up landing more in the middle of the block. And if I was doing another custom set, which I'm going to try to get the next, whatever the next true set is, I'm probably going to try to buy a set, and I'll do a 34 probably plus 2.5, and I'll strap them the way I strap the Pro Return ones and not these ones. But that is a bit of a warning, and I will suggest everybody to try to find a way to try these things on. True does have their floor to knee sizing guide on their website. Go by that 100%, but also try things on, because depending on how you strap this, they can fit a bit differently, and my preferred strapping system works better with a 34.3 than it does with a 30. So onto this pad itself, and we look at the side, and the boot is kind of soft. Now, it's not like one of those crazy soft E-Flex 4 boots that I had that basically felt like it doesn't exist, but it is pretty soft. But the big thing, this boot doesn't really get in the way of the pads ever, so you never really need and really feel that kind of compressing. With that said, this does feel fantastic for post integration, so this stiffness really works well for post integration, pushing off. I'm going to be talking about that a little later when we talk about that boot, but it has enough give in there not to be annoying and strong, but it's not really that soft either. Now, the interesting and crazy part about this pad is the thigh stiffness. So this is as stiff as I can order these, and you can see it is very stiff. And did the thigh rise test on this already. You should watch it. Like I mentioned, it's very impressive. These pads did very, very well. And this is a very stiff pad, just the way I like it. So overall, like, pad stiffness and stability on these is also crazy good. So you can see, like, when I'm pushing against, they don't move a ton, and like when I'm going like this, it doesn't flop a ton or anything like that. It's pretty stiff all throughout, and it makes the stability awesome. As a comparison, the E-Flex 6 is kind of a competitor to this pad, but you can see how like it totally bends around, and this totally stays like very firm and very straight. So a big difference between this and this pad and the style of it like that. This is awesome for me. I'm a huge fan of this. Obviously, you see a bunch of goalies in the NHL kind of going to this style, and this pad kind of spec where it is stiffer overall. But, and here is honestly my biggest complaint about these pads, is that theoretically I shouldn't like these pads. These are obviously from the 12 line, which was what everyone knows as the E-Flex series, and it should have been like more of the softer style pad with the more flex to it pad. The 12.2 still had some give in the thigh rise. This doesn't have that give in the thigh rise. I think this pad is fantastic, and I think a lot of people who think they need a softer thigh rise and pad would work really well in these pads regardless, and you don't have to order them as stiff as I do. You can still order an internal brake and stuff. But with that said, and this is where we're going to pull this pad up, there are goalies in the NHL like Binnington that use a softer pad. So this one, you can see, flexes more than that one does, and I don't want to flex that because I like this pad being as stiff as possible. There is people who still prefer that old softer pad design, and right now this pad doesn't kind of meet those people, and really I should be more of a fan of the 20-point line. So I'm happy that this is an option to order these this stiff, because it 100% is going to, like, it's saving goals in the NHL, and it's saving goals period. I've gone over this over and over and over again with how thigh rises do make a difference, and Trues have been very good for them in the NHL, and we've seen, like, I have examples of goalies, like I have a Pittsburgh example I showed off where the thigh rise is the only thing that stopped a hard shot, and if it wasn't True, if it was some of those other companies, it wouldn't have happened. But this is going to be my biggest critical piece of this pad, is I truly think that this needs to go back to that 12.2 stiffness, and maybe even offer a softer version of that too. I really wish the custom options for this were basically like that double internal brake, so it really flexes all the way to what this is. And that would basically make this, I think, pad one of the perfect options on the market, because it would really be there for everyone. But currently, people who are looking at a pad that's softer, like a Hyperlight pad, for example, which has that more flex on the thighs, this is hard to recommend to them, because I know that this just doesn't flex the way that people are really looking for. So something on this graphic that is pretty interesting that I want to talk about really quickly, and something I saw on the 12.2 pad, is you can see how there's all these edges on the graphic piece everywhere. Previously, True actually folded over some of that edge. So instead of having like the little side piece where you can see like the white of it, it would be folded over. I'm not sure if they just folded it over and sewn it, or like folded it over like the one behind and sewn it in. I'm assuming that is more labor intensive and takes longer than what this is. So I'm not sure if that's the reason why they went with that. It doesn't make any difference, but it's something I noticed and something I want to call out because this one is different than what the other one was. Looking at the face of this pad as well though, we do see these cords through the face and everywhere, and we see these knee rolls too. So it is a more traditional build in that case where it isn't like the face coming off. And I have absolutely zero problems with this because I feel like a lot of companies are trying to go with that, like I'm bindingless face, and a lot of times you can see the face kind of bubbling off. This is so tight everywhere. It feels a lot nicer in terms of like staying tight and not getting looser, and some pads you can kind of see it bubbling off. This will also kind of help with rebounds a bit too by not coming off. You can see those dents on the Bauer pads where Bauer's skin is so like it doesn't have all these sewed pieces on it. It's so tightly like round up that they kind of don't need this, but those dents end up being cause of that. But really that is kind of a dent too, how that kind of goes in, but it's not a thing. I just wanted to call it out. Speaking of these knee rolls, they are squared off as you can see, and so hard. Okay, they're not like the hardest thing ever, but they're just as hard as the face, and they really don't do anything anymore. So this is purely like an aesthetics thing. Yes, rebounds, if you get like the corners of here, or like here, is going to be slightly different than if you got it straight on, but overall they don't really do a whole ton anymore. I like it from an aesthetic standpoint. I think they look really good with them on, but if these go away in the future for either weight savings or just easier production, or for some reason, I would be totally okay with that, because for a whole like actual pad and stuff, they don't do anything anymore. So they can go away, but they're still kind of cool to look at, and I like the overall aesthetic of them. And rebounds on this though are pretty soft overall, especially compared to stuff like kind of I'm wearing now, but they're not like super crazy soft like I've used in the past, like older Vaughn pads. The V9s and actually the V10s are also softer than what these are, and this is like kind of closer to the SLR3 line, but it's still solid. And the harder the shots obviously create bigger rebounds, but everything kind of in the shins here I find is pretty controllable. When it does get harder, they still go out far enough where it isn't a huge issue, but when you start facing beer league shots, it does get harder to kick those rebounds out a bit. You can see all the puck marks down here and like how many saves I made. These ones, like the rebounds, don't go quite as far as I'd like them to. I really do wish that they did something a little bit different on here to make this a little harder of a face for bigger rebounds. But I will say, between my two, these Pro Stock ones do feel softer for rebounds than my blue ones do, and the whole like foam at the front also feels harder. So I'm not sure if that is the different like foam options, because this one does have like a little almost yellow foam in there, where this one is all white, so you can see kind of the white in here. So I think that is the two different rebound options, where this one I did notice it kicks out more than what these ones do, and these ones are pretty soft overall, but those ones are a bit better. But I still wish it was more. I love big rebounds, so this is a personal preference thing, where I love Bauer's crazy rebounds, and I love being kind of lazy and being able to kick out anything that hits here just flies off, and it makes it harder for the opponents to get. But again, it's not really a full butterfly pad, so I kind of understand why this pad in general isn't as big as rebound as say maybe a 20.2 is, but overall they're not crazy and they're not super soft either. They're kind of an in-between. Also, since we are on this outer face, I'm going to talk about this roll really quick, and you can see it here. It's not massive, and it does have a pretty decent gap here that allows the boot to flex up and down like that. This roll is so hard and solid though. It's one of the better designed rolls I've ever seen. This is really hard foam and dense foam in here, and this thing isn't moving anywhere. I've seen some pads recently where the foams on here are pretty soft, so if a puck does hit here and they're so soft, it's just going to kind of like compress and probably roll over and not really do a whole ton. But this is so hard that I'm a huge fan of it. The one thing I commented on though was the size of this roll, and I'll kind of mention that again. With that said, on the boot, it's kind of a hard thing to compromise with, because if you do have a max height roll here, which kind of gives that a little bit more, this attacking into a post and kind of sealing a post will be worse. So it's kind of a like pick your poison type thing. Honestly, I would probably choose this to be flat just so I have better post seal, because sliding into the post and dealing with the post integration happens more than a puck hitting this and rolling over. I guess in that case, this for post integration, it makes a lot of sense. And this being a bit smaller as well does make more sense, because if you do the shin integration, or if you're just diving into posts like this will help out more than a puck hitting here. Onto the sliding edge, and this is something that is very interesting to me and surprising to me, because we will talk about sliding at the end of this. So as you can see, sliding edge is broken up into a piece here, which we have the upper piece, and then the lower, and then the boot. And this is a pretty hard foam, and when you look at the side, you can see kind of the thickness of it, and you can see me pushing it in. It is pretty solid all throughout, and it's hard here as well, and here. And the Pro Stock one is the same in that sense. This is the most surprising piece to me because of how fantastic these pads slide. And this whole piece right here is the whole reasoning behind it, and how hard this is, and this design all right here is really, really good. Now, I was critical of Lefebvre designed pads in the past with CCM. The Speedskin ones, Speedskin sucks. They have Fast Glide on theirs. Obviously, I didn't get that. There's a reason I didn't get that. Talking about sliding and everything, these are the Pro Return ones, and these are just a normal white Gen Pro, and the sliding on these and these, the difference is minuscule, where it doesn't really make a difference. But because this is kind of obvious here, you can see this foam, Gen Pro kind of coming up. I don't know if this is going to be an issue in the long run, but you notice it there, and obviously you like to see that kind of tight. But if this a little bit of looseness there gives it a little tiny bit of give in terms of wear, I'd be okay with that, because we have seen in the past Lefebvre gear kind of the knee blocks kind of flaking a bit. So if that kind of helps, and you can kind of see it down here too, so if that is a thing that kind of solves that by not being crazy tight, I'm totally okay with that. But I want to call that out, because if I didn't call out these ripples, people would comment on it, and they're there. But honestly, it's a pretty small nitpick. And speaking of those materials, yeah, this is the weave, and like I said, it slides almost the same as the standard Gen Pro, and it I do not need to put my 3M PPF film on these pads to make them slide better, because currently these are my third best sliding pads. So number one is the SLR3s with the quick slide. Number two is the Warrior G6 with the plastic plates, which is kind of like cheating, but it's on the pad. And number three is this. So yes, this slides better than my Bauer pads. I had Hyperlights. I now have Hyperlight 2s. This slides better than those do, which people are going to think I'm crazy, but it's 100% true. I also use the newest eFlex 6 pads. They slid terribly compared to these. These slid way better. So the difference here clearly is, well, one, True uses excellent Gen Pro quality. Everyone says they're always the same, but you can kind of see the difference in backing material in some of them. In some companies, it is slightly different. This whole design here and how stiff this is, and especially up here, this is so hard up here. It's a bit softer down here, but up here is so hard. And it's softer on the boot too. You're not losing any force here for sliding with a give of this. It just flies, and it's very, very, very impressive. And this is fantastic. I'm a huge fan of this block and sliding, and I've had a bunch of people ask me, hey, I want better sliding pads, but I'm a bit concerned about True pads. What do you think I should do? Do I have to put PPF on them? And my answer is simply, these are the third best sliding pads behind a pad which has the best sliding material and a one with plastic. So you're good with these. You don't have to worry about them. They slide awesome. So huge props to True for managing to do that, because this is very impressive and very well done. And you can see right here as well, the little cutout for the thigh rise. This is fantastic for that integration, and you can see it coming down here as well. But this is so when your pads overlap, they don't get in the way. So when this is thicker, they can't slide in as well. But when it's thinner like this, and you're kind of in your stance, this kind of slides back and forth a lot easier, and you can see how it kind of fits in there like that. So that makes this pad, when you're in your stance and when you're moving around, get in the way of each other a lot less, and allows them to cross over pretty really, really well, to be honest. And because of how thin that is, and that is so thin and yet stiff enough because of the new composite piece they put in here, which I don't know if you can hear it. I don't think you can really hear it, but there's a composite piece in here that stiffens this up to make this part very stiff, and is one of the reasons the thigh rise test on this did so well. That is also allows it to be thinned out that way too. So you have the stiffness as well as being able to make it skinny, so it's easier for integration, which is a fantastic piece, and this really, really works. These never get in the way. I've never noticed. I had noticed it in other pads before, and these do a fantastic job for it. And you can definitely notice the tips, especially my stance when I'm watching from the front, and how high these sit on my legs. The tips cross all the time, and this never causes an issue because of that. So I'm a huge fan of that. And speaking of that, I do love how they have the Gen Pro piece right here. Because of this cutout and everything, with this cutout as well as the pads overlapping, having that Gen Pro is going to help wear on the nylon so the nylons don't hit each other. You have two Gen Pros sliding on each other because you'll have the face of one of the pads and then Gen Pro. Fantastic design for more durability, and honestly it looks really clean as well. So huge fan of them adding that as well. Going on to this calf wing, we'll get to the knee block a little bit later, but going on to this calf wing, you have this pretty dense foam and it does flex a bit. So it's not a crazy hard piece like Bauer, but it is stiff enough that stability on this is fantastic, and it's one of the more stable pads that I have and have worn, and we'll talk about stability in a second, but this harder piece definitely does help with that, because when you do push down and it is stable and it kind of hits the ice and you can feel it a bit. But with that said, you'll notice when I do like neck cam and stuff, the pad of this, the torsion flex of it, which is kind of me skipping ahead a little bit, does allow like the boot, the knee to be here and this part to lift up. So you'll definitely notice that in my playing, where this is the only part on the ice, this isn't, and then like the boot down here is, but this piece kind of lifts up and moves around. It's still stable from the knee block, but then this part does add when you really stretch out and can feel it still on the ground. The pad never feels unstable at all, part to do with the straps in here, which we'll talk about in a second, but everything just feels solid, and this block is a great integration of it. Stability and everything on these pads is honestly one of the best, if not the best, I've ever used. It doesn't like wiggle around or anything, and when you're like stretching and everything like that, the pad is always totally flat and extremely stable. When you lean in over like this, you have to go crazy far to make that tilt, but when you go into like this, it is all still totally stable, and that's extremes when it's doing that. So it's very impressive. You do have the NHL legal kind of binding groove here. Again, NHL rules and regulations for pads mean this can't be all one continuous piece. It has to be separated. So here we have that separation. Obviously, I'm not in the NHL, but this is how they build their NHL pads. So it's nice to see them build it on their retail pads, so you get the same quality, which is awesome. And to show this kind of groove out like this, you can see it kind of like this all the way through. And there are a few that of these cords that aren't quite as deep as you would want. They could be like this one could be a little bit more in here. But when you look at this side is always high enough where these cords are never touching the ice whatsoever, and this part is always on top. And I say these cords never touch the ice whatsoever because when you watch my CCM eFlex 6 video where they have the similar design, these cords touch the ice a lot, and this thing doesn't work. So you can tell CCM just continued on this because, again, Lefebvre designed this piece on their pads in the past. CCM kind of continued with this build design, yet instead of making sure everything was good, they just didn't really do it very well, where you can tell the true craftsmen are right here. So again, quality of stuff here and well done. You also have a piece of Gen Pro right here that helps when your leg is kind of in here. This piece does touch the ice, so that will help with wear and everything. This piece probably doesn't need to be Gen Pro. This is going to be the sliding part because it's right on the edge, and then that part will take over. And with this whole boot design, it's not a huge thing, but you can see when we turn over to my Pro Return pad that I have used more, this red has a little tiny bit of wear here. So again, a very minimal thing, and it's just on the very tip of the binding, but maybe if Lefebvre could cover this a little bit more, it would be kind of interesting to see if they could like get this over top. I don't think in terms of build that would be really possible, but this binding does get a little tiny bit of wear in there, so even if this kind of comes over a little bit more, might be a nice thing to see just for some more durability in that sense. But again, this is a massive nitpick because there's barely any wear there, and these pads have probably been worn 60 times, 70 times since I got them in this video, and that's kind of a lot for that little tiny bit of wear, so it's nothing to really worry about. So moving on to more of the toe construction, you do have this binding all the way through here, which is just traditional and standard things right here. There's like no wear points whatsoever on it. This is going to take the brunt of it and maybe a little bit here, but this pad sits so high off your skate now that honestly, this is going to be most of the sliding area because this doesn't really drag or anything on the ice. So that's kind of the way it is. Toe ties and toe integration system. So they use Pro Laces stock on everything, and you can see how that works. Screws into this toe piece right here and the Pro Laces. So I'm going to do a very quick review of these Pro Laces, and I guess I'll probably do a separate video because people won't really know about it, but these work and they're fine, and the quality of them is fantastic, which you would expect. This is like a double sewn Gen Pro piece with Velcro, which is fantastic. Also put in here so it's like armored, so the elastic in here is covered by the skate lace, so it's protective, and it gives you this as a bit of slack built into it. So overall, like, they work really well and they're solid. Now, my complaint about these, and it's kind of my complaint about Pro Laces in general is I understand why all of this is kind of sewn in to here. Like that makes sense. So you have a bit of slack and everything. The screw piece, I mean, they want their own little piece here. So that makes sense as well, I guess. The part that bothers me here is these pieces right here. I hate that I cannot adjust this elastic inside here, that there's no length adjustment. Now someone will be like, oh, well, you have the length adjustment of this. But one, I don't want to leave my toe like laces like this, right? I want them to be like this all the time. As well, even doing this isn't enough for me to keep this from falling off my Bauer Connects. Now my Bauer Connects, it's a stupid design for toe ties because it always just slides off because it's the interesting plastic that molds and it doesn't really have anywhere to sit right and it's not flat. I wish, and it would be so easy, instead of sewing this through, like they made a little hole right here that allowed you to pull the elastic cord through and put your own tie point in here so you could tighten these or loosen these, because the way that these are, they either fit or they don't, and you can't adjust them. So I know they have different options and stuff, but it's just kind of annoying that they're the only option online, the only option out there, and they're like the most expensive toe tie option where you can't actually adjust the lacing. So like you can feel this right in here. It would be great if instead of sewing this through elastic, which I'm assuming is done, it would be kind of great if they had a little pocket that's stuck through so you pull it through and you can tighten it and loosen it. And I'm sure no one will want this to be done, but I wish it was done because it would allow a little bit of customization to it. And since it comes on these pads, it's part of the review of the pad. We have overall normal nylon out here. They're not doing anything crazy with the design here. It is all binding this out here, but you do have a pretty thick boot, which is interesting with how the boot plays. And it does have two boot options, which I believe we have here. I'm not sure which one is which, but you can see how this one is flatter than this one. This one's a bit taller. I can't remember the degrees on it. This one sits a bit flatter on your pad, where this one is a bit more rounded. I've noticed amazing post integration with both of these pads, probably a bit better on these just because it is a bit flatter. But I do notice that, like, and I put a video up on it, which you can watch on YouTube, of how great the post integration on this is. And I'll keep talking about that, but it's fantastic. And I noticed at the very first game playing this one, I do notice it's slightly different and it's still fantastic. I still really don't have issues with this, but I think if I were to order again, I would order this one. So it is a bit like flatter sitting. I think it's a little bit better toe integration into the post. So I'm a big fan of this boot design, but both of them are really solid and they both sit on your pad pretty solid, and they're both really thick compared to some other companies that have just come out with pads, but they perform fantastically. And when we go on to this backside as well, you can see the thickness of the shin here it's not super tiny. It is decently thick, but it's not massive either. And it has slimmed down a lot since like previous pads. And it obviously slims out when we get to the thigh rise and then gets slimmer up there as well. And you can really feel how stiff this piece is right here when you feel on over here. A bit softer here, really stiff there. And then obviously just as stiff right there as well. Going on to the boot design, everyone has been copying these boots, just to be totally blunt and just put it out there. Ever since True and, well, Lefebvre first with the 20.1 did their pad boot, basically they really flattened this out, and you can see there's basically no channel whatsoever in here, very minimal up here, and over here is super flat. And we're going to show how this pad sits on your skate as well, but super flat boot channel to really make that pad sit up on your skate, to give zero interference on the skate and the ice, so it really sits up there and doesn't get in the way. As well, obviously it sits higher on your pad, allows you more thigh rise to get around K Whitmore NHL sizing. It also just happens to be like one of the best feeling boots there is, and post integration with this design also is fantastic. Post integration with this pad is very good. Even with that little foam piece there, because of how flat the boot is and how rounded it is, when you try to dive into the post, it hits like that more often than not, and you can get pretty good at it. I find that with these toe ties and with this, like the little gap right there, it really doesn't get in the way at all when you're trying to jam in there. As well, when we look on this side, when we seal that up, right now there's a bit of a gap just because of this piece right here, but overall it's pretty close, so you can kind of do that. And then finally, same as here, so there's a tiny gap. A puck might be able to fit through there, but you can seal it pretty well overall when you lean into there. So these have a pretty solid post integration, and honestly this right here is one of the best I find it really easy to slide into the post with these. This with the shape is excellent and one of the best in the industry, and a lot of companies are kind of copying this, not necessarily because of post integration, but it certainly helps. The pad definitely sits above the skate and on the top of the skate, as you can see with that zero channel. So when I wear a pad like this is a 34+2, I can get away with it. Where in the past, because that channel would really, like with a boot channel, would sit a lot lower, I would have to wear a 35+2. But this, a 34+2, totally works just because that sits so much higher. And that's gonna help with mobility and moving, because when you try to drop in the butterfly, sitting higher off your pad means the pad interferes with the ice a lot less sooner versus it sitting way down there and instantly touching. Nylon out here, Gen Pro in here for more durability, and it's not crap Gen Pro like Power use on the Hyperlights and the Ultrasonics where it kind of flaked off and wore off. This is a much nicer material, so it's going to last longer, and this is obviously where your boot is going to be interacting and the laces, so this part needs to be more durable than just nylon over here. So we'll look at the strapping system now and the leg channel, and there are some options to get leather straps on here and a boot strap. I didn't get a boot strap on this pad, but my Pro Return pads do have a boot strap, which is this design, which you can remove this one by pulling it out of here, and then this just attaches here, which just isn't really removable. I wish they kind of went a different route with this whole bootstrap design. You can see how this is kind of fraying. This piece always touches the ice all the time. You can see it in my videos, and it always kind of sticks out like this because I don't do this tight, so I don't wear it like this because I don't really want a bootstrap, but there's a bootstrap on here, and honestly, I just use this for carrying my pads, to be totally honest. But I kind of wish this was done in a way where this was removable as well, because if this whole piece was removable, obviously this is an option. So personally, like, I didn't get them on this one, but these pads had them. Now I could just easily cut this off and pull it out, but I wish that this had like a little tab in here like they used to do on the fade pads on CCM, that you could just like unscrew it and take it out, and then it just has that tab sitting there so you could do the bootstrap. I also wish you kind of had the option and like had a piece here too, so like maybe do it here and here, so you could do either behind the skate or underneath. Now for true pads, these are custom and they're 9x3 lines, which these obviously aren't. These are the PX3. So PX3s are always going to be custom, so they're going to be to your specs. But the 9x3, I would like to see that kind of in that line where, and maybe that's on there, I haven't seen them, where you do have the options for these different pieces and they're like removable. But again, this is a custom pro spec, and obviously pros don't really care about that, so they have it like here. But it would be nice from a retail standpoint, just so you have options, and then that way you can tuck things away when you don't really want them, and that would just be a nice thing. But obviously not a massive thing and not a huge issue, just a small nitpick of more options. And going into this, you do have this outer calf wing, which is basically used for one set of straps, and it's pretty small, but it's nice and padded overall. We have this piece, which is more that calf wing, and we have this inner wing and this little pillow. So I talked about pillows and stuff and seal. This one, as well as the FRS, kind of acts as a little pillow. I almost wish this was bigger and kind of came down and was even thicker. I don't know if they could legally make this thicker, but this doesn't feel like it really cheats like my Optic 2 pads and like Brian's Optic pads do. So I kind of wish this was a little bit more and kind of came down maybe more and was thicker. But honestly, these pads perform so well. That's me just like being a hypothetical. I wish to get a little bit more cheating out of the pads. Honestly, I'm happy with the way they are, but if it was possible to upgrade that or have an option to have it bigger and thicker, I would select it to see how it performs, because I've liked that in the past. Not super dense foam, but like it feels protective enough that if you get a rogue shot here, you're gonna feel it. But we Velcro that off, and you can see how that is connected to this piece here, and we have this strap that goes back there. So just a Velcro piece right there and kind of sewn all in like this. So we're going to put that back together. So the Fave built pads or design pads used to have different leg channel options, so you can get tighter and looser fit. This one doesn't. The way that this all fits in here and the way this FRS system works, you can basically adjust it yourself anyway. So if you really want a tight channel, you adjust this to be tight and it acts tight. So when you don't have the option to kind of pull this in more to make it tighter and the whole thing tighter, you don't, in my opinion, really need it, because the adjustability of this makes a huge difference. Like, that's making a tight channel, that's making a loose channel. So you can see how this strapping system kind of works with that and does everything nicely for you. Also, with the FRS system, I've been talking to people recently about this. This is simply the best strapping system I think on goalie pads there is today. And there's a ton of companies that are kind of sort of mimicking this in their own way and trying to do it. And this is just simply better than everyone else's. The combination of like this piece, this piece, this piece, and this works so well together. And you can see how it kind of like fills out and adds padding to it. And the adjustability of this gives you a professor strap if you want, or just a looser fitting piece on here so it doesn't really have any issues, or you can just take it off totally, which I did on the Pro pads. The way this FRS system works, you have a piece of Velcro here and you have a piece of Velcro here. So if you want to take these out, you pull that out and you can do that. And then with this Velcro, you either do it loose, so it's a looser fit, or you can pull it tight back here, so it's a lot tighter fit, as you can see. So you have quite a lot of adjustability there, doing different things. The top piece of this as well basically acts as a professor strap. So this one can help keep doing this tighter, kind of helps pull the leg down a bit. Doing this tighter really pulls the pad up. So with these pads, because they're 34.2 and you watch the footage of it, me doing this kind of tight, which I was doing for a while, and a different strapping than what I do on the 34.3s, I end up landing on the lower portion of this block, kind of down here, which isn't the best, and you want to be in the middle. The whole reason I am doing that is because of how tight I've been doing this strap. So I've loosened this since that, but when I was playing with it, like for these testing and stuff, it's basically sitting there, and this acts as a professor strap, rotation control strap, whatever all these companies are calling this now. I had people ask me, can I put a professor strap in true pads? I'm like, you don't need it. You have this. Tighten this up. This is going to help pull the pad up, and it's going to act as that as you need it. It's just a better overall design where it's not like pulling out of the cords, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, but it's actually part of the pad design and not just like kind of sitting there floating there. For me, wearing these pads, with how these pads sit, I have to loosen this up a lot and wear it pretty loose in order so my knee doesn't go all the way up. Now with these pads specifically, because the thigh rise is a +2 and I might probably want a 2.5 on here, I don't take this off totally because I'm okay landing down here as long as I don't land below the block, which I don't, and I don't because of this strapping. But on my pro pads, I took this piece off totally. So, well, actually I took this part off specifically because I didn't want to lose this strap. So I just loop the strap over itself and it just dangles. Doing that allows me to land higher in the block, so it has no real issues there with sizing and everything. It's just how you strap them and wear them. I never wear professor straps in any of my pads. I don't need my pad to slide up. I'm not in the NHL. I don't need extra thigh rise help for sizing because I don't have limits on thigh rise sizing. In order for me to keep my knees and everything from not falling out of the block like too low and everything, I simply do this back here, and that keeps it kind of not from going any lower because it won't allow my leg to slide past that. Now we're continuing on strapping right here a little bit. You have this fantastic piece right here, goes in here, comes out there, and that's it. Very simple. This is not stretch or anything. This is just a cord. I use this super loose, basically just like that, because it's just keeping the whole wings kind of at their minimum. And I don't like really tight pads, but you can really crank this if you want to really make that leg channel feel tighter on your pad. I'm sure that will help pull up the pad a bit as well where it's located. But that's not ever my goal. Though I do really like how this strap is made and this strap is made, and how these straps are made with this like Gen Pro. This is like a weird kind of Fast Glide like material on here, but it's Gen Pro. It's nice and thick. It's a nice tab on it. Same with this one where it has a tab to pull off. And this is just the nylon. The weird part is how this side does it, but I guess you don't want this to tab off. But it is weird how this one isn't either, because you would expect kind of to have one of either this type of tab or this type of tab on that one. You don't. It's fine. And I just wanted to show that differences. And continuing on with strapping, we'll show how these go in here in a second, but you do have this piece as well. So with all the elastic straps, I saw a ton of NHL goalies continue to use straps like this, which are leather straps. So I don't use this one, obviously, because I hate leather knee straps, and it went through the block right here just like this one did, and it was a leather knee strap that went to here. So now this just dangles. I should probably cut this off. That is kind of the same idea with this. Instead of a leather one, you have this nylon one, which doesn't stretch at all, and very nice tab construction that goes down here. And this basically creates a maximum zone of your leg to come out at. If you have elastic straps, which you do, and you are like falling out of your block, basically stops you from falling out this way. Because what happens if your knee tries to go this way and this stretches, you can stretch past it. You can't stretch past this cord. This cord locks in place. It can't go anymore. So if you really want to make it tight, right? I don't want this tight. You can do it there, and your knee can't go past it. Your knee will stay in the block. Great idea. Great to have as an option. I honestly don't use this strap like at all. I just stick it here as loose as possible. But I don't have issues with that when I wear pads this way ever. It's always up. But as well, I'm not an NHL goalie, and I know NHL goalies still want this on here. It's on a ton of NHL pro returns. Adding this here for the retail thing, just being elastic and putting it in here is, I think, a fantastic design and a really good implementation of this. Continuing on strapping and the knee block design here, I think this is the inner removable calf wing on here. I don't know exactly which one it is. I think that's what it is. I absolutely love this design, and the reason being because of this shape right here, L-shape type thing. And when you put it on, obviously it sits there, but the reason I love this is when you're in your pads and like you're sitting here and you're leaning this way, this still gets bunched up and it still kind of gets in the way, but it's a lot less than if it was a massive piece right here. So you've seen Bowers and stuff are going a lot smaller with this, but with this design and how like smaller and cut this is, it just allows your knee a lot more movement in here. Absolutely love this design. I think it's one of the best knee wings, and I hope it doesn't go anywhere. This one specifically is removable. You have these cords in here. You can just untie and pull it out if you wanted. And even when I don't use, like when I go down here for the strapping on this part kind of just sits there like that. So it doesn't ever get in the way. It kind of just sits on the outside. Now, one thing I want to call out, and I noticed it on specifically these ones, is how like you can see how this is all bunched up, and I'm glad this is double elastic like this. It makes it last longer and then it's sewn together. That is because it's going down here, and I found that this was pinching a bit where I didn't have that issue at all on these pads, and I wore these pads longer and like I've worn them more. It's just because of the strapping choices I made on this basically, and my knee got kind of bunched up behind this and was causing this. So I changed some things on here to try to fix that and not make it worse, but it's not a big deal, but I wanted to call it out as well. Onto the knee block itself, we have this wonderful Sure Grip material, and this feels fantastic, and this is the better Sure Grip basically than every other company right now is doing, and it is more textured than all those companies. Now, I like this just for added grip on this block. This could be a nylon if they really wanted to. I don't find that this makes a world of a difference, to be honest, but I like having it there and as an option of grip. So how this knee block is made, you have Sure Grip here, which we're gonna unvelcro. That velcros in two spots here. You have the block kind of sewn in here, and there's obviously my strap for that piece as well. And then we unvelcro this, and we have this wing, which is a decently dense foam for what it is. It's pretty thin, but it's pretty hard too. And then the block attaches down here. So you can see how you can adjust this piece right here, so you can go tighter or looser. I'm at like the loosest setting I can possibly go to. It just velcros in there. And then as well, you can adjust that as well. And that is also on the loosest setting I can go to go down there as well. Foam kind of piece on here. This is a pretty dense foam, and it's really hard. As you can see, it's not a plastic because I could see what it is, but it almost feels like as hard as a plastic, but it's not a plastic. And some companies are using plastic or stuff that's harder than this, and it hurts. And this is a pretty solid foam. Like, it's dense, but it's soft, so it's really nice. And I'm a huge fan of this. I've had zero issues with landing on here in Bauer 1X knee pads, which are not padded and comfortable at all, and in Warrior X4 Pro, which are comfortable. I had no issues with these, wearing them back to back multiple times a night. I wore the Pro Return ones 3 times a night, multiple times. Zero issues with them. Where I had tons of issues with other pads, zero issues with these whatsoever. This whole build up with this foam package and everything is fantastic and really well done, and in my opinion, one of the best on the market in terms of padding and kind of knee softening and landing. So I'm a huge fan of what they did here. Most companies are adding some sort of piece into the face of the pad here and kind of making this super stiff so it doesn't kind of slide back and forth. Here's the thing with this pad. Completely undone, I can slide it out to here at max with how it is sewn into this piece, and it's not going into the face. It's simply just how that cord is sewn on the inside piece right here. So obviously push really hard, it kind of goes a little bit more like that, but that it still isn't a huge amount. It's not sliding crazy over there. Then once we keep this in the middle, slide this on and then slide this on, that is how much we're getting movement here. And yes, over time, I'm sure when you kind of push on this over and over and over again, this is going to kind of move out more from its perfect perpendicular spot. But I think this design and this is basically the max you need in terms of whole knee block stiffness, what is going on here. But when you have this strap going here, as well as this strap going here, you can even play with this tighter to really lock that in more if you really want. The thing about this and why I like this like movement is I've never had a time with this pad where I've attempted to make a save, for example, going like this. Hopefully this kind of comes off with this block, but when like you're on an edge or stretching, that flexes to help the pad kind of come down. Watch this piece right there. You can see it flexing to allow the pad come down. Whereas if you have that really hard stiff one and you hit here, it doesn't flex, so it gets stuck. I like having this piece detached from the face, so it does have a bit of give, so it moves a bit more with your leg. But this piece right here, I feel does need to have some give, and I've seen goals go in from NHL goalies where they land on this first and it doesn't seal the thigh rise because that's on the ground first, this isn't, and it causes issue where if that's softer, the force down is going to continue going and moving while this is moving, and it will help see, like that will seal faster because it won't get stuck and get in the way and wait for the whole pad to kind of rotate over. So pad seal on these pads is absolutely amazing. Here's me kind of leaning into the pad. Now a full real lean into the RVH is like this, and there's nothing there. This is an over lean. You're not really gonna play this unless you're really like kind of jamming into the post to try to cover something really quick. And yet everything is sealed perfect right here. Little raise over here, but everything else is perfect. That's how good these pads seal and how well they play like this. It's really, really impressive. Weight and balance of this pad. So this is by no means the lightest pad on the market. And honestly, when you pick it up, it feels kind of heavy. But that doesn't really matter in the grand scheme of things. And the reason that doesn't matter is because once this thing gets on your leg, it's so well balanced that all the weight is like basically just feels like when you pick it up for here, it feels really light. When you pick it up on the thigh, it feels heavy. When you pick it up on the boot, it feels heavy. But when you pick it up here, it feels pretty light and totally fine. So all that weight is right on all the whole strap system of your leg. And when using this, I wasn't tired, and what you expect, oh, more weight means you become tired. I wasn't more tired. I felt totally fine in terms of endurance. I've worn these Pro Return ones, which are bigger than this and heavier than this, for 3 games straight a night for playoffs, and I was totally fine doing it. Obviously, get tired in game 3. Wasn't a thing in the past where like I wore eFlex 4 pads and was exhausted after 1 game. Not the case here. This thing, the balance is fantastic, even though the weight is higher. The weight doesn't matter on things. That's why I never give specific weights anymore, because people always worry about that. When you have stiffer components in it, and like more dense components, it's going to be heavier. You're going to get stiffer, which is, in my opinion, a good thing. You're going to get more puck stopping in the thigh rise. But at the same time, when the balance is so good on this, it offsets kind of the weight, and they're totally fine and excellent to use and with zero issues with. The other thing I want to cover on this, and I covered it with the kind of the other view, but stability on these things is so good, and seal is so good, and you saw it on the other view. When you're sliding around on this pad, you're always confident in your movements in the pad and stability. You never feel like you might top over one way or the other, like leaning too far this way and kind of flopping over, which is something I did recently in my Bauer pads. Now sometimes you see myself kind of folding over on these, but it's more like I just get stuck on ice in an awkward situation. When I'm making moves like hard drives to post and stuff like that, I'm always confident in these pads. I know where they're going to go. I know my leg is going to be stable. I'm not worried about like the kind of rolling over like this or anything like that. They are fantastic and amazing on your leg and to perform, and they're so good, and it's just awesome. The other thing to talk about these pads is quality, and True has been, well, Lefebvre has been known for quality gear for a long time, and they've made NHL gear forever, so you keep getting this. The stitching on here is always fantastic. You have a ton of like double stitching things on here. Like you don't need to do the X there, but they do, and it's great. But like the stitching all just through here is like a work of art. It looks so nice everywhere. It's just such a well finished and also well designed pad that True and Lefebvre deserve a ton of credit for what they're doing, because I have been seeing some like drop off in quality materials with some companies. Bauer's using some like cheaper nylons in here than they used in the past, and kind of doing some things where you can tell they're like porons going away, stuff like that. They went to composite with this, which is something some other companies did in the past, but it's a nice thing to see for changes for that. But everything else just is quality and really good. So that about concludes my review of the fantastic True Catalyst PX3 pad. So this is the first True pad I've really reviewed with ice usage, and it is absolutely phenomenal. The whole set is really good. Pads are unreal. And I have to kind of come out with an apology here. When Lefebvre split from CCM, I was really curious to see the direction things would go. You knew that they were going to be quality on the True side of stuff. And well, at the time it was Lefebvre building their own gear. You knew the quality was going to be there. You knew you were going to get NHL pads when you bought them, which is what these basically are. I have the actual NHL ones over here. They're 1-in-1. But the question was kind of what would happen in terms of innovation and changes on there. At least that was one of my questions. As like a couple generations in, we can see the differences between True gear and CCM gear without being designed by Lefebvre, and this stuff is just night and day better. Now, they're not using crazy materials on here, which honestly this pad doesn't need it because it slides that good. Did add composite in here for more stiffness, which is awesome and fantastic, and this like slides a lot better than I was ever expecting. Now, I always have people ask me, well, what's your favorite pad? What's your favorite pad? And before this set, it was honestly a toss-up between things, because every company still does, well, this is still kind of thing where every company will do things slightly better than others. But if I had to pick a pad right now for playoffs, it's this. Easy. Now, if it's this one or my Pro Stock one, I don't know, just because I do like that little bit bigger thigh rise on there. Pad is so good and performs so well that it's an easy answer for me. If I need to win a game in playoffs and my team like wants a best performance out of me, it's going to be these pads. But again, my one only real complaint about these these pads. The Catalyst line is supposed to be the softer pad, and I wish there were more options for this thigh rise and for the overall pad in general. This is super stiff, as you can see. I love that, but I love really stiff pads and I love big rebounding pads, and this line is technically not supposed to be that. So I love that it's an option and it's available for me to order in this spec because this spec is fantastic, but I do really wish they had that double break internal that we see on a pro stock true pads with like a different core here too, but with like really soft double break internals, and I would love to see that as being an option. I think this is the way goalies are kind of going to go in the future, but at the same time, people still like that softer thing, and it's a feel thing. Now, again, I haven't worn the 20.2s, and I'm curious to see what the next Catalyst, well, the next line is. It won't be Catalyst, but like Hazardous or whatever the next one is. I'd be really curious to see what those are. I hope I get to test them out. So if anyone from True is watching this, if I could place an order for one of those, I would be internally grateful and would really love to use those. I am going to try buy one, and I'm going to try to get my hands on a set because I want to test them and compare them side by side. But this pad is simply the best pad I've ever worn. And I have to give a ton of props to the Fave for designing this pad and making these changes that really made this pad absolutely amazing. There's a reason so many people in the NHL are wearing their gear, and this pad specific. I hope this video is very helpful. Thank you very much for watching this very long video. Hopefully there's a ton of details in here and you get the whole look of the pad and how the performance is and everything, because it's really impressive and it's really, really good. Thank you very much for watching this video. Let me know if you want to see any specific gear reviews, and let me know what your thoughts are on these pads. What about this colorway? How awesome does these pads look? Or let me know how ugly they are. Let me know in the comments. Just tell me. Talk to me. If this video was helpful and the whole series of this stuff was really helpful, please reach out to True on like social media and stuff, like True Goalie on Instagram and Threads and all that. Let them know this video was really, really helpful and you want to see me do more content like that and do more reviews on their stuff. It'd be greatly appreciated. It helped in the past, so maybe it will continue in the future. So thank you very much for watching this video. Hopefully it was helpful. Remember to subscribe to me on YouTube. Follow me on Instagram, Threads, which is a new thing, and TikTok. Links in the description. If you want to support the channel and you're buying hockey equipment anyways, if you live in Canada, check out Hockey Supremacy. If you're in the US, check out Pure Hockey. Both links are in the description. If you click those links and make a purchase, I get a kickback. It helps support the channel so I can make more videos and do more reviews. Otherwise, check out Patreon, Buy Me a Coffee. Everything through those links will always come back into the channel so I can buy more gear and make more content. Thank you very much for watching, and take it easy.
You're watching HockeyReviews.ca.